So thank you kind of experience.
Absolutely. Let me first say that I do not consider myself an expert in the Latinx cultures and all the nuances, but I think that social cognition is kind of a nice framework to kind of shed light on those experiences. And so I would broadly define social cognition as the study of knowledge about the social world, and mostly people, groups, culture, and it accounts for how that knowledge is organized, the kind of the mapping of your belief system, your knowledge about yourself, people around you, the culture you may identify with, and then it also shed light on the processes. How do you activate certain pieces of knowledge, how they affect your judgment, your behavior. So it's both the focus on the structure, the mapping of a knowledge system, and then the more, in my opinion, more interesting, the more dynamic aspects of those things come into play in face-to-face interaction, in the particular settings, point to the malleability of our beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors.
Yeah, in class we just finished talking about ethnic identity, and really that focus was on how an individual can come to a resolution about who they are with respect to their identity. What we haven't had a chance to really explore is, then what? Then what happens? And I think there are two aspects to that. There are, how does that identity sort of manifest in terms of behaviors and thoughts? And then I think the other piece is, how do interactions with others have implications for thoughts and behaviors? I know I'm sort of giving you a broad canvas to paint with, but maybe you can help us start to tease apart that experience a little bit.
Absolutely, and so one of the distinctions that I tend to focus on is this idea that your knowledge, your beliefs, your identities operate at two different levels. And to me, the narrative part is capturing this kind of very conscious, deliberate sense of who I am, what my identity is. And so if you are a bicultural, multicultural person, you may consider that both of those cultures, that you are a product of various cultures, that they are very important to you, that you cherish them both, that they define who you are. But if we talk about that, if we share our experience, our perspective, that to me is capturing something that is very deliberate, very conscious, that I can structure. I have control over how I present myself to the world. And that's
what we believe, that we have that much control over our expression of that identity.
Exactly, and that's very important. I don't want to dismiss that. It's very central to who you are. But it's also the case that in our everyday life, the culture that we are the product of, or the multiple culture that shape us, often operate at a much more below the surface, automatic, unconscious manner. So the way I talk, my facial expression, how I react to what you may say, and all those stuff, I think that I'm not very much in control, that are operating on this kind of automatic, unconscious level, and that are still probably a reflection of my cultural upbringing that define who I am. And so those things to me are equally important as the more conscious narrative. And sometimes they may tell the same story, and in other case they may reveal very different facets of who I am. I may not be fully aware that, in my case, my upbringing from Europe and so on still to this day shape how I interact with my colleagues, and so I would have to watch myself interacting maybe to realize that, but it's still very much a product of important cultural experience that shape who I am. And so this distinction is a bit artificial, right? Things are not always purely conscious, deliberative, or purely unconscious, or automatic. Very often what we do as we talk, for example, right now, is kind of a mix of, I put some thinking in terms of what I say to you, but there are also things that I do not fully control. When I start a sentence, I don't know how it will end, kind of thing. So, and there are other aspects of my facial expression and so on that, again, I'm not aware, or I'm not fully able to control. So to me, that kind of dual aspect of psychological life is very important. And so sometimes there are actually disconnect between how you think of yourself, the deliberate, the narrative, and how the system actually is operating. Like I may have a sense that I found a way to blend my many culture in something that is coherent, meaningful, integrated, and maybe the way the system actually operates at this more automatic level suggests that those things tend to remain fairly separate or are not fully integrated. Not to say that that would be a bad thing, but you see kind of the disconnect between my conscious thinking about who I am and then those more underground automatic reactions.
Yeah, and I think at its core, it makes sense, but at the same time, it's one of those things that I think some of us have a hard time swallowing without, at least, you know, if you want to apply it to your own life, without some good examples. And I wonder, if I had to challenge you a little bit, is to say, to the people who don't necessarily believe that there are these two levels of consciousness, and that they influence things like attitudes and behavior, or expression of attitudes and behavior, is there a good example that really convinces most people that this is solid stuff?
Sure. So we could, then maybe we'll get to that in a minute, to the how you can study that in a research settings. But you also have kind of the mundane everyday situation. And one example I like to use is, let's say your phone is ringing, you're picking up the phone. Depending who is in the other line, there may be a different identity that comes to the surface without you realizing. You know, is it your mom, the work setting, your culture of origin, or is it your research advisor who kind of embody the SDSU culture on this campus? So those things overlap, but maybe they are distinct at some level. And so automatically, you know, the ideas about yourself, what is appropriate, what you can say, not say, how you express yourself, may be different depending who that person on the other side of the line. And so it's not like you consciously think, oh no, I need to be the good daughter or son of this person, or no, I need to be the dedicated, hardworking research assistant that I'm in the lab. But those things are automatically activated depending who you are interacting with. So to me, those shows that over the course of the day, we kind of alternate who we are as a function of, you know, the task that we are doing, who we are interacting with. And so the cultural influences will, again, shape maybe our thinking, our way of responding to what the other person is saying, in a way that does not require you being very deliberate, thoughtful about what is going on. It's just natural. I have many identities, and you know, when you play with your kids, or when you are in a research settings, it's a different Dr. You, or it's the father that you are at home. And again, those things are grounded also in your cultural